Build wealth, retire early, and live the life of your dreams with Dr. Paris Woods. This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Paris Woods. She's an award-winning education leader, a social entrepreneur, and an advocate for financial empowerment. She's a best-selling author of The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom, to Build Wealth, Retire Early, and Live the Life of Your Dreams. And it really is flipping the script on how we talk about money with love, honesty, and rebellion against those toxic financial narratives that are out there. She's a Harvard grad, a doctor of education. I don't know why she's on my podcast, but she's definitely overqualified. But she's here to really drop some serious knowledge. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, no, the book is doing so well. It's been, really like a blessing, and if not a surprise. I think I wrote the book for personal reasons. I was like, how come no one ever told me these things? Then I sort of discovered this whole FIRE movement and met folks like you and felt as if I wanted more folks to get exposed to the community and to some different ways of thinking about money, and captured it in a book because writing is a great communication style for me. And so I've just been so amazed with the reception. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's been really fun following your journey because you and I met a few years ago. I think it was like 2021, actually. So we met at this workshop out in New York, and I remember you telling me, I want to write a book. And so it's just been so cool to watch this happen and unfold and follow your journey on social. It's been really great.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. I met you before the book even came out. And I got Paula to endorse it. So, wow, you've been here from the very beginning of the journey.
That's right. That's right. We did our 10-year planning workshop together, right?
Yeah.
So you said, and I remember talking with you, early on, that you weren't always financially savvy, even though, your degrees from Harvard. But like, what was your first financial wake up call? Like, what was what was that moment for you that kind of changed everything?
Yeah, I think one of the wake up calls happened to me probably in my late 20s. So we're talking about post fancy degrees and really getting into my career. I had sort of accepted this role to build a college success program for a charter network in New Orleans. So I was like living the dream of my career. And I finally had my own apartment with no roommates, right? And so I'm sort of like getting into this early adulthood and starting to realize that financially I was feeling very constrained. Like I didn't have the choices I wanted to have. I appreciated my little studio apartment, but especially as a Harvard grad, I've got friends who are doctors and lawyers and, investment bankers and have a lot more choices financially.
Mm-hmm.
I never expected to get rich going into education. That was never one of my goals. But at the same time, I was like, I really feel like I'm struggling financially. And as someone who grew up in poverty, and for whom I would say college was my exit ticket out of poverty, I felt like, well, I'm not poor, but I still am not feeling completely financially sound. And so it sort of put me on this journey of learning. I had to educate myself on money. And so I sort of took that route and started picking up books and, going to conferences and really trying to educate myself on what was I doing wrong. And so that was a wake up call. I think sort of having felt like I checked every single box and things still weren't quite right. And so I had to go figure out what wasn't working and why.
Right on. What do you think? So what is that one of the biggest, now that you are, a personal finance expert, what do you think the biggest myth out there that we are sold on about money? And why do you think people fall for it?
Yeah. A big one for me was around debt. And especially growing up, I don't think we had access to a lot of lending products. There's sort of a limit when you're making money to where maybe you can get a payday loan, or you can't really access a mortgage, or you can't sort of get a car loan. And so I'd sort of been raised that success was when you could start to qualify for various levels and sort of increasing amounts of debt. And what I learned as I got into that sort of late 20s space was, and I had student loans from my master's degree, I had my car loan, and what was causing me sort of pain in my monthly budget, I realized was caused by all of these payments going out of the door and not having enough left over for saving or for investing or even for just enjoying life. Sort of like all my money was already owed to everybody else. And so for me, my financial freedom journey started as a debt-free journey. And that helped me get control of my spending, get control of my budget. Sort of, I had to get really crisp about where every single dollar was going so that I could get out of debt. And once I realized I could actually control my money, first of all, and then secondly, once I sort of got out of debt and had more room in my budget, it freed me up to think about, well, what else might I be able to accomplish now that I can manage my money and I sort of have some understanding of how these things work. And that's what led me to thinking about investing, thinking about early retirement, thinking about sort of like what else is even possible once you have a basic understanding of how money works and sort of have a little bit more money available to work with. So yeah, that big myth around debt, I think, was preventing me from accessing all these other much more exciting things you could be doing with your money. So I was really happy. Like that was like the single core thing that shifted things for me financially.
Okay. Okay. Just from a nuts and bolts perspective, when you first kind of started budgeting and stuff, how did you start? Like, what did you use, and how did you start to make sure that, again, what money was going out? Like, were you like zero-based budgeting, Dave Ramsey style, or what did you do?
Oh yeah, picked up Total Money Makeover.
Okay.
I actually think that was the thing that got me to start thinking about debt differently.
Yeah.
I read that book like standing in a bookstore. I just happened to pick it up and read the whole thing standing there.
Wow.
And it was like a light bulb moment. So I got very meticulous. Like I think I went overboard on budgeting. But the goal was to sort of squeak every single little dollar out that I could to put towards debt payments. Mm-hmm. So I was figuring out exactly how much I'm spending on electricity and how to get that number down, exactly how much I'm spending on all of these things. That is not how I budget now. Like, I think it's actually a bit too much. And I'm not, like, I'm a creative person. You know, I'm more of a writer. I do some singing. I do some, you know, I'm not a spreadsheets person. I really don't believe in tracking every single dollar. So I started there. And that's what helped me get out of debt. And then I had to come up with some more reasonable approaches. I had picked up a tool called You Need a Budget, YNAB. So that was like my software tool to track literally every single dollar. So yeah, I was pretty hardcore about budgeting. And I think that works in the short term. It wasn't my long-term solution though.
Right. Where did you find the biggest leaks? What were you spending money on?
Yeah, definitely. It's like housing, transportation. Okay. And I think for me, the next thing was my cell phone, just because I didn't have that many expenses, or probably actually my loans, but sort of outside of the debt payments. And you think about it, like back then, I was living in a studio. I think my rent was $800, and that was like the single largest payment I had in my budget. And I was already in a studio and it was my first time living alone. So that was not something I was initially willing to change. So I had to like get down to all these other little ways to cut expenses. But later, you know, I was like, okay, creatively, on the sort of latter end of like, okay, I really got to get out of debt sooner rather than later. I cannot keep doing what I've been doing, which was the most. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do now? My credit's great. Obviously, I've been doing all the right things. I'm going to buy a house. And I'm going to buy a house for the sole purpose of eliminating the housing expense. And at that time, I couldn't afford to buy a multifamily property or anything like that. It just felt like too big of a risk. And so I worked with my realtor to find a single family property where the layout would work for Airbnb. And so we found just like a 3-bed, 2-bath. This is actually how I found Paula Pent, because I was researching how to do Airbnb and she had a really great post on it. But yeah, we found a layout where I could sort of put the back, like the master bedroom and bathroom was like behind the kitchen. So I could put a door there, lock it, and just put that on Airbnb. And that Airbnb completely covered the cost of my mortgage. Wow. And so that allowed me to eliminate that housing expense and put all that money, this was still in my debt freedom, like all that money towards paying off the car and the student loans and all of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where were you when you did that? What city?
That was in New Orleans.
New Orleans.
It was
Okay.
like at the time a big Airbnb place. Nowadays they have lots of laws and restrictions. You got to
Right.
find a workaround if that's your approach. But yeah, back then it was really a perfect way to eliminate my housing expenses.
Right on. That's awesome. Are you still rolling with real estate? Do you still have more short term, long term?
I have a rental property now, and so I've sort of shifted away from the short term, like to just a regular long term rental. So
Got it.
yeah,
That's my jam too.
yeah.
So one thing that I like. So your book, even in the title, it says financial freedom, and I think so many people think. I guess I'm curious on your take on to get ahead and like back when you were like kind of digging out, paying off like every dollar that's going out is paying like your car payment or whatever. The world today is just obsessed with like the hustle culture, right? We have like the gig economy is crazy. Like my daughter drives for DoorDash. On busy days on a holiday she can make $36 an hour or something. I mean, it's crazy. But like, I guess, how do you think that the hustle culture affects us in our wealth building? Or I don't know, what are your thoughts? I mean, you use real estate as kind of that piece, but what do you think in all the other platforms that are out there?
Yeah. I mean, I had to work my way up to real estate,
Mhm.
but I started with the hustle culture
Okay,
mistake.
okay.
And maybe we all got to go through that to start to
Yeah.
realize it's not sustainable long term. So once I sort of got my budget down to bare bones, I
Mhm.
started to realize, okay, you can only cut so much. At some point, you got to bring in more
Right.
income. So I started doing the side hustles, right? I was
Really?
like doing some consulting and
Okay.
like coaching folks and things like that. I started a nonprofit. So I was like coaching entrepreneurs on how to start nonprofits. And so I was working around the clock. It's like burning the candle on both ends. I'm working nights, I'm working weekends. And I remember getting to sort of tax time and filing my taxes and just saying, well, how much money did I bring in? And it was through all the side hustles that I sort of broke the 6-figure mark. And so that was another light bulb moment to me to say,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, wait a minute. I can make 6 figures. This is amazing. And now I have a choice. Am I going to work this much? I was exhausted. Am I going to work this much to make 6 figures, or is there another way? And that's when I found Vicky, your money or your life.
Yeah.
And my takeaway was the value of your time.
Mhm.
And so what I sort of internalized was that it would be much more sustainable if I can make this same amount of money from my day job and not have to work a million jobs. And so
Sure.
the next part of the journey for me was I need to increase the value of my time and increase how much I'm charging for an hour of my time. And so I had to change jobs. Right. And so I had
Yep.
to get a higher paying job. And so that was the next piece. And especially sort of for women of color, like we know we're underpaid. That's sort of part of the system, like historically, statistically underpaid. You cannot budget your way out of poverty. It's one of my sort of go-to. Like we actually have to focus on the earning more part of the equation and the
Sure.
charging more for our time. Like it's the one thing we can't get back is our time. It's the most valuable resource that we have. So if you're going to trade an hour of your time to work, then we need to get as much value back in exchange for that as possible. So that was my antidote or my solution to the hustler culture after experiencing it and and I was in my 20s, right? I'm like, I had much more time, much more energy than I have now in my 40s. But realizing that's not sustainable and then sort of moving toward, well, how do I sort of make more money in less time? And eventually as an entrepreneur, you start to, you're no longer trading hours for dollars, but most of us are going to
Right.
work. And so how do we sort of get as much value in exchange for every hour of my time that I'm trading?
Yeah, that's one thing that I think many people. I mean, I wasn't until in my 30s when I was still just trading time for money, and in my head, I was always thinking like dollars per hour. How much money am I making? Dollars per hour, and then I would always bank on the overtime, and I'd put in the extra Saturday, and it was always dollars per hour, right? It wasn't until I read a book by Harv Eker called The Millionaire Mind, which
Mm,
talked about how rich people think and how poor people think. And it was really talking about, again, the value of your time and getting paid for results, right? It's like performance based earnings. So, it's not like you're getting paid dollar per hour. Like you provide those results and you get whatever you're charging. And that really kind of changed changed the game for me, because then I started looking at like commission based type roles. Like that's where your salary can really increase. I like what you talked about. I mean, I just think that there's opportunity there. Do you coach other women on like employment coaching, like
Yeah.
working up the ladder? Because it seems like that is something that's missed so often.
To me, that was the biggest difference maker in my journey, because the more money you earn, the more you can drive toward any of these other strategies. So the book has a whole chapter called Earn, because I
Oh,
was like,
love it.
this was such an important part of my journey. And in terms, I do have courses. And so I teach sort of this make, manage, multiply framework. And it starts with make, because you've got to make more money before you can we can optimize what we do with the money we bring in, and the manage. And of course we can invest and multiply. But for me, it starts with make. It's another thing we're not taught how to do. Most of my career background is in college access. So I've gotten to work with young people for decades now. Even, on the other side of doing everything we've asked you to do in terms of college, earning a college degree, sort of doing your post-secondary education, et cetera, like we haven't as a society done a good job of even linking that to good jobs. And so you'll go to college and do all of these things and not know how to leverage that degree into employment. And so I feel like it's another big gap that we have to make sure that folks learn how to do. Like, how do you maximize your salary? How do you optimize your career? How do you actually do work that you love and make a good living? And how do you make it so that you don't have to choose one or the other, which is another sort of misnomer or myth. Either I love my job or I'm making a lot of money. What if you could do both? So that,
Right.
I think it's a big topic. Certainly something I spend a lot of time talking to folks about, and it's something that has made a huge shift in my own personal financial journey.
So, what are your thoughts on, since working with young people and college access? I'm definitely an advocate that college isn't the path for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I was able to work my way up and finally, break making six figures and doing that, but I have no college degree. And so I want to hear your take on, I guess, where college is going. One, obviously, because it's hard to get access when costs are so high for some,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I know there's a lot of programs that are great, and so many people just don't know they're there. But
Right.
also, you can get certifications, and
Mm-hmm.
there's vocational programs. I guess
Okay.
I want to hear an expert, your opinion on how to get ahead. Like, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's such a maybe a misnomer, or sort of
Mhm.
like a untrue distinction between being on a college versus a career path. This is what I'm seeing in the field. And so if sometimes if folks want to bring the conversation around non-traditional college pathways like industry-based credentials or sort of
Mhm.
training programs, apprenticeships, et cetera, there are still a group of people who hear that and hear that it's devaluing education. So that is a myth. That is not true. And I'm working on a student facing edition of the book. It'll be called The Student's Guide to Financial Freedom. And this, I actually break it down in much greater detail, because I want students to understand that when we see the research that most jobs, especially if you want to be in the middle class and sort of have some sort of sustainability in your career, requires post
Mhm.
secondary training, that is a very expansive world. So we need to understand that when we say college, it's inclusive of lots of different training programs. I think the other piece too, and this is where, when I said we're not doing a good job translating education into career opportunities, young people, as like in high school, I think are missing out on an opportunity to explore career paths. And a lot of the career training, we call it career connected learning, is what the field calls this, helps you get exposure to whatever your future career might be, whether it requires a doctorate or whether it requires a 12-month credential or a 6-month certificate. It benefits you. It behooves all of us to start to bring that future career dream into the present through some opportunities to test drive those. So I always, I think about my own journey. In high school, I did a pharmacy tech program.
Mm.
And they're working on sort of a pathway to get underrepresented folks into pharmacy. And so me and a few of my friends, we did this. We got our pharmacy tech credentials. We
Oh,
actually got to
wow.
go to Walgreens, and we were like counting out the pills and all this, like
Wow.
literal certified pharmacy technicians.
Yeah.
Now, I did not go on to be a pharmacist, right? I was like, loved this and realized this is not my calling in life. But the credentials sort of helped me understand how the working world works. I got to meet professionals. And now I know a lot more about an aspect of our society. I know what's happening when I go to the pharmacy, even though I don't work there.
Sure.
So I would encourage anyone, especially young people, to find ways to test drive careers and to start get exposure to whatever it is you think you might want to do. And then you can start to explore, well, what is the pathway to get there? What training does it require? Does it require a college degree? Do I need a master's degree, et cetera? So we can start to actually connect education to career. I think that's the big thing, especially for folks who want to be upwardly mobile, who want to get out of poverty like I did. Well, we need to make sure there's money on the other side of education.
Right.
And that's what I want to be true, regardless of the path that people take.
Yeah. I mean, both my kids, I have young adults, they're 23 and 25. And, when we were having those discussions, I told my kids that as long as there's some sort of plan, like it doesn't have to be college. I guess the last thing that I wanted them to do is if they want to go to college, cool, but I don't want them to spend 30, 50, $60,000 and then not use it at all. You know what I mean? They go on to do something else. That to me would just be frustrating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and I think about my own. So I did the credential. I did all kind of stuff in high school. I was very busy little bee. Um, but I went to like a liberal arts college, right? So for someone like me, that was such a meaningful experience. And my major, I went to Harvard College, majored in African American Studies. And for African American Studies, you choose it's such a huge field. So you actually have to choose your specialization. And so for me, I specialize in education. Because once I got to college, and especially a place like Harvard, coming from my background, I got exposure to folks from so many different walks of life, and so sort of very different income backgrounds and educational preparation backgrounds, and got really interested in well, why was your preparation so different from mine? Or why are the kids wearing the Phillips Exeter sweatshirts, basically at camp? And all of my friends who went to public schools are having to learn something different to do well here.
Right.
And so I chose to specialize in educational inequality. And I don't think I didn't have a career path in mind. I just, was thinking I want to learn more about this subject because it's interesting. It's very meaningful to me. And I hope I'm part of the solution. I'm seeing a problem here. I want to be part of the solution. And so the career sort of unfolded in front of me. Now I'm a chief program officer at a national organization. I couldn't have even conceptualized that as a career path. I just wanted to be part of solving a problem, sort of part of the solution. So for me, a liberal arts education was really valuable for that. And I remember folks asking me when they say, "Oh, you're at Harvard, what are you studying?" And I'd be like, "I'm studying African American Studies." And folks would say, "Well, what are you going to do with that?" And my response is always, whatever I want. This is my life. I'm learning. I love learning. I'm studying things that are really meaningful to me. I'm seeing the world differently and through fresh eyes. And I will figure it out. Now, I will also say I went on a full scholarship, right? And so there is an ROI calculation to be done to sort of the advice you were giving your own kids. If I'm going to shell out $100,000, I want to know what the ROI is for that. And that's a question everyone has to answer for themselves. I had that same narrative, that same question when I did my doctorate. So now, you called me Dr. Woods. I do have a doctorate. But this time around, I had to think about the opportunity cost of enrolling full-time in a degree. If I wanted to go back to Harvard, all of their doctoral programs are free, but you have to enroll full-time. So the opportunity cost of losing out on a six-figure salary, which I was earning at the time, and the ROI for my career. So did I need a doctorate to do the things that I wanted to do? No. I wanted a doctorate because I love to learn, and sort of it's
Sure.
always been a goal. So for me, for that degree, I made a choice based on that data to go to a well-regarded public institution. So I did my doctorate at the University of Texas at Austin, UT.
Nice.
And I paid cash. I didn't take out any loans. At that
Good,
point, I was like, no,
good
I'm
for
not
you.
doing debt. I don't agree. I don't want any more loans. I'm on the other side of that. So I found a program that was affordable that I could afford to pay literally from my salary to cash flow it. And
Wow.
so,
Good for
so
you.
that,
That's so
I think
awesome.
that's the kind of calculation we all should be doing with anything that we spend a lot of money on, whether it's education or anything else.
God, that's so inspiring. Like you hear that? People you can do this on your like that's awesome that you cash flowed that and again getting those credentials is super cool. So that was the thing is like when I was in high school, so I was again I wanted to be creative and I was in the graphic arts graphic communications classes and stuff. And I remember I took graphic arts 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I took school service hours. So like I wasn't getting credit, but I was in the department like helping because I loved it so much. And then the senior year, I would go to class just the first 2 hours of the day. Then I would drive to the vocational school for graphic arts, and I did that at the Votech, and that's what led me to work. I mean, I worked in publishing for the first 18 years of my life. And so I just don't know today in high school, are they getting the same exposure to those type of things? I just don't know, you
Yeah.
know?
There are a lot of really great programs. And, I lived in New Orleans for quite some time, which is it's a much smaller place. And so I worked for an org called Youth Force NOLA, which sort of serves as the hub to be able to provide these types of career connected learning opportunities for a lot of smaller schools. But I spent a couple years in Texas, and that's how I found myself at UT. Huge school districts, huge schools. And so the district was able to offer a lot of these opportunities. So I think depending on the market, depending on where you are, opportunities may look different, but there are a lot of really great programs popping up. And this sort of conversation around career connected learning, post-secondary pathways to good jobs is emerging. Luckily, we still have federal funding coming in through sort of these Perkins and WIOA funds. There's federal funding for getting folks career training, even beginning in high school, if not younger. So I would definitely be taking advantage. Wherever folks are listening in or have kids or whatever, there are programs. I would be looking out for them and taking advantage of them. It's not cutting young people off from future opportunities or options, is actually increasing them,
Mm.
increasing their exposure to careers and helping them see the value, even of a college degree, the value of post-secondary education and what it's going to produce for you on the other side of that in your life, right?
Sure. For me, one of the biggest challenges to get my kids to see past next week. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get the delayed, future gratification, delayed gratification? Like, they're not thinking that far ahead. That's the
No,
biggest thing. So, do you have any tips how we kind of wrap this episode up? Like the psychology of how to get these kids to think about the future. That's what's really hard.
I know. I love it. I love it. This is one of the things I had to think a lot about too when I was adapting the book. Because for us, we can say, well, what if you didn't have to work? How exciting would that be? And you can start to come up with stuff. For young people who've never really worked, that's not a good question.
Right.
And so one of the quotes I had on my wall growing up was, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Mm,
Okay. If there was
love it.
no fear, because you're always worried about fitting in, or you're worried about all the worries that we have when we're
Mm,
young, what if none of that were true and you could literally do whatever it is? It doesn't matter what it is. That's the thing. That's the thing that
mm,
we adults have to remember. Like, think about whatever your dream was and how many times it changed. So it doesn't matter what it is. It's you thinking about, here's something I want to work toward, and then building that muscle of taking the action steps. Here's my plan. Here's what I'm going to commit to. And that's the muscle that we continue to use even now as we're planning whatever the next pages in our journey, we're still using that muscle. So who cares what the young person comes up with, but how do you support them to see what it's like to achieve or to get exposure or to try out that dream?
Yeah.
And then learn that, okay, I can set a goal, I can take some actions, I can see if I like the thing, and then I can pivot. That's like the most important lesson of all.
I love that. I love that. What would you do if you couldn't fail? That's the question we have to ask young people. Paris, this was so fun. Thank you for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. Let
Yeah.
people know where they can get more of you, where they can find your book, where they can follow you on social, all of the things.
Yeah, easy peasy. Books on Amazon, books anywhere books are sold. But The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom. Most folks buy it on Amazon, I see. And it's also on audiobooks. You can get on Audible as well. And then stay on the lookout for the Student's Guide coming out soon. And I got a workbook adaptation coming out soon as well. Workbook companion. And then on social media, author Paris Woods. Instagram, TikTok is my favorite, YouTube. So author Paris Woods on any social media platforms.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. Thank you everyone for listening and watching on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya.